Welcome back to another episode of Life of a Doctor's Wife. I'm so excited for today's conversation because we're diving into a topic that I know so many spouses and parents in the medical community can relate to: the reality of carrying a lot of the parenting load when your spouse has a demanding career. Today I'm sitting down with Aimee and we're talking about what it looks like to solo parent when your spouse is working long shifts as a physician, away with the military, or just unavailable because their career requires so much of them. And then we're going even deeper into a topic that deserves so much more conversation: raising neurodivergent children, learning how to advocate for your child, navigating appointments, therapies, school systems, and all the emotions that come with that, especially when you're often doing it while your partner is busy caring for patients or serving. The reality is there are sacrifices, loneliness, and seasons where one parent is carrying more of the day-to-day responsibilities. So Aimee, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Yes, hi.
Before we jump into some of the heavier topics, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your family, your story, and how you found yourself basically in this season of life?
Yeah, so I'm Aimee Thompson. I grew up in Arizona, and I decided my senior year that I wanted to move far away from Arizona, and I moved to Virginia for undergrad. And I met my now husband. We actually just celebrated 11 years. So we met in undergrad. We both were in pre-med at the time. And we got very involved, like when we were dating, but also prior to us dating, when I first met him, in some different like medical mission things that our school was a part of and ran. And so that's kind of how I met him. About a year after I met him, we got married. And then we finished undergrad together. And at that point, he was still kind of in his pathway. Like, he knew he wanted to do medicine. And I knew at some point I wanted to do something in the medical field, but I was still kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that much school. I don't know if I both want us to both do it. So I instead, we moved to med school, and for him, and I did some like side work, different things like that. And then we had our first two kids in med school. So while he was in med school, we had those first two kiddos, and then we proceeded to have two more during residency because, as my husband likes to say, let's make medicine harder and have more children. So we had two in medical school, two in residency, and then fast forward, we are now coming up on our second year done with training, and we just had our fifth child in January of this year. And, I knew going into med school, like, because I was pregnant during our first year with our first, and I was nannying for a family. I was doing some side work. My degree ended up being in biology and family and childhood development because I knew that if I wanted to go back sooner rather than later, or continue with a master's and do something in medicine, sooner rather than later, that I could. And I've done different things here or there. And right now I'm focused on raising our family, and being the solo parent, and being in the military also adds a key piece to that. And so it kind of does make that part challenging at times. But I knew during that first year, when he had started med school, and like we had one kid, and like we were at that point already committed to the military, that things were going to look a little different. And that meant that, for a while, probably my career or what I wanted to do in life was going to take a back seat for a while. So I think that's kind of when it looked a little different for us.
Yeah. I guess, what does your family look like today?
Well, we're in Hampton, Virginia, and my husband's at the Air Force Base. He is one of the family med physicians, and I have 5 kiddos. They're 7 and under. they're all very close together. So the oldest being 7, the youngest being 6 months. I have 3 with an autism diagnosis, and I have 2 of the 5 with some very specific medical things, seizures, different things like that. So lots of specialty appointments, lots of therapies, IEPs, 504s, the whole gamut of fun things that I've definitely, looking back 10 years ago, or even 7 years ago before I had our first, had no idea about a lot of things in that world of education and, special education, but also just like, things that you qualify for, things that you're eligible for, things to help your kids, things to help you, etc.
Yeah. No, as someone who had a 504 growing up and through school and things, and like talking to my mom, which now things have changed so much, but I was honestly just talking to one of our neighbors the other day about it and how much my parents had to fight for things that I didn't realize. And now that I hear like the stories and things, and like my parents had to purchase an entire like reading system for me and then had to like basically fight to get reimbursed for it and things like that. So like some days I like think back and I'm like, I was so fortunate to have parents who were financially stable to purchase that for me, because I'm like, what happens if my parents didn't have those finances? Would they have just pushed me through? Like, where would I be today? So yeah, it really is eye-opening, and it's sad that sometimes you really do have to push. And unfortunately, I feel like we're not in that stage yet, but I have sometimes already experienced some of that with our daughter, Mia, and having to push for certain things in the healthcare system, to try to get answers to things.
Yeah. It's really hard sometimes too, both, I think in both avenues, the education side and the medical side, because I've dealt with both with multiple of my kids now, that it takes a big mental, like, not only are there times where I'm like, I am an educated individual. My undergrad is no, I didn't go to medical school, but yes, he comes home and talks about those things, right? You hear about those things, you read the stories, whatever. But then also, like, I did go and do, like, I have a lot of exposure, a lot of experience as well. And then now now that we're, 5 kids in, and almost all of them have gone through some kind of therapies, like early intervention, developmental therapy, physical therapy, and so some of those things, sometimes like, it's like, this is not my first rodeo, like, and it's very evident to most of those, people that we work with. But then sometimes I feel like, unfortunately, I find myself like having to, like, definitely, and it's our job, right, as parents, but like just having to advocate, and sometimes it can be so mentally draining just to sit there and like have to re-explain, and let me advocate again, and let me get a second opinion, and let me spend an extra 3 hours or an extra $300 so we can go get to the second doctor so we can get a second opinion, because I really don't agree with what you're saying. And it's hard. And it's hard to do it. Like, it's hard anyways. That would be hard for anybody. And then it's hard to do it alone. Like, not alone, because they're there. Yeah. But they're not the ones, even now, like, I have recognized that, like, we've got a whole year, of done with training. And yeah, does his schedule look a lot nicer than it did in medical school and residency? Sure. However, at the end of the day, even on days where he is off, or he happens to, I say, hey, can you take this day off so I can take X kids at this appointment so you can watch the other 4, right? Or the other 3. Yeah, that's great. And some people are like, well, he could just go. And I'm like, well, he could, but he doesn't know the medical, like, he's not the one there 90% of the time at the appointments. He's the one in his own clinic. And so it definitely puts that I hate using the phrase, but that default parent, I am the default parent. At the end of the day, my husband recently was deployed. I am the default parent. I'm the one that's going to know the entire medical history. Now, if you ask him something, he might be able to get the information, but he's not going to know it off the top of his head always, because, and the reality for us is we have 5 kids. So, and he also sometimes will, like, mix things up across our kids, or across, like, oh, well, there was this patient, and, like, so it's hard.
Yeah, no, totally. I will never forget when we were inpatient with Mia too. It was like he was coming and going, seeing patients in the ER, but then also trying to be there with us. But then at the end of the day, I'm the one where the doctor's calling my phone to talk to me, and then I'm relaying the message to him. And it's like, okay, as much as you are the soon-to-be doctor, you're just not readily available for this. Like,
right. And it definitely gets, as we've gotten later into training too, we even just this last kiddo, when he ended up in the NICU after he was born, like we had a resident come in, and he was there with me, and he later was telling me, he was like, yeah, well, I didn't really agree with what they were planning to do. And I was like, well, why didn't you, like, he ended up saying something, but not in the moment. We waited a little while before he brought up what he didn't agree with, essentially. And I was like, well, why didn't you say something when she was in the room? And he was like, well, I didn't, she's a first year resident, and I didn't, and I was like, well, that's fine. But like, I'm like, you are here in this moment. So I said, not only was I 24 hours postpartum and very, very exhausted, I didn't catch what was happening. And like, I'm just sitting here like any other parent would sit here. So I need you to be, so I need you to
advocate too. Yeah.
Yes, I need you to advocate too. And he does. It's hard because 99% of the time I am taking them to all those appointments. I'm making sure that everything is, taken care of. And because there is I have a lot of high needs kids, and, I get that sometimes over time it will get better. And, some therapy, like, we'll graduate some therapies, some other things will pop up. Like, it's okay, but it still can be it can be a lot. And it's definitely not always, like when I think back, people ask me about like, oh, did you think you'd have a big family? And I did always want multiple, like I did want a lot of kids. It's definitely not, I didn't picture, to have multiple with an autism diagnosis, to be going to therapies all the time. But it's definitely taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot of like resilience and flexibility. I'm one who loves to plan, and I laugh when I say that because, I also married somebody who went into the military, and those two things don't go in the same sentence. So a whole lot of my, specifically once he went active duty in residency, I've had to learn to just, be flexible and and medicine is that way too, but you add the medicine and the military to it, and like being flexible and being okay not knowing. And then like we recently experienced getting 48 hours notice and being like, all right, you're getting deployed to another country, and we're going to have to be okay with it. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. What seasons across like med school, residency, and now attending life would you say have felt like the hardest for you as like solo momming it?
Yeah. I would probably have to say residency. And some of that, even now, I mean, we're only 1 year done with training, but, now it's just, and it depends on what specialty, right? He's family med, and he works for the government. So he does get some of those holidays off, and he does get, weekends off, and he works in a clinic. Now, the caveat to that, or the trade-off, right, is we got 48 hours notice, and he was gone. And we didn't know where he was going at first, and we didn't know how long he was going to be there. And it was a very large time change. So there was very little conversations happening. So that was hard. Hard for a different reason. I also felt like I had talked to, people that I had like now met in the last year. And I was like, but honestly, it didn't feel a whole lot different than residency. And that's why I think I would go back to say that residency definitely was the hardest. Because we did have 2 kids in residency, which put us at having 4. So like the beginning of our 3rd year of residency, we had our 4th. And now granted, 3rd year was the easiest by far of the 3. but it was a lot, it was a lot of inpatient. It was a lot of nights doing solo bath time, and doing that with multiple kids, and then managing, managing their appointments and their stuff during the day. Like that's always going to be the thing, because I do stay at home with the kids. Like that's one thing. I think for me, it was always okay, well, for 2 weeks straight, I'm doing bedtime every night, and it just doesn't end. It feels very lonely. And it's also very hard when they're all very young, right? Like we had some friends who, maybe had a couple older kids, or they had some that are in high school. Like, not that that's the same as your spouse, but having someone who can actually have a conversation with you, versus like, my oldest was 5, she finished kindergarten the year that, like, she finished her kindergarten year, the year we graduated residency. So they were all 5 and under. Like, that was hard, by far.
Yeah. And they're also at that age where they're not really self-sufficient. Like, yes, if you ask them to do something, but they're not going to make themselves their own lunch or get themselves dressed, really.
Exactly. Yes. And especially even now, right? Even just 2 years in a kid's development, right? Like, now our oldest, right? She's now 7, and just her being in first grade this year, and me being pregnant, and him. Yes, I mean, we are done with training, and his hours are a little nicer, but she gets herself on the bus in the morning. I mean, yes, do I have to be up and help her get out the door? Sure, but like, it looks a lot different than it used to look when I was putting my kindergartner on the bus, 2 years ago, right? So it definitely looks different.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for anyone who is exhausted, have hit that low point, but still have to show up?
I think my biggest advice, and I in different avenues that I have talked to people now, or, met new people, or just some of my different advocacy roles that I do hold that we'll get to a little later on. But I, all the time, I'm like, even though it is extremely hard to do this, I get that when I say this, is like, you have to make time for yourself, because even at the end of the day, like, sure, it could be a super small thing, whatever it is, right? Whether that's, get up or make it work so that you can still go to the gym with their schedule, right? If you have, whatever that looks like. I get that everybody's situation may be a little bit different. Maybe the spouse, maybe that's, spending 30 minutes when they are on their one day off, and you go and, I don't know, go work out by yourself, or whatever that looks like. For me, and this has been pretty much through it's med school and residency, and now done with training, it's going to sound very silly. But I don't get my hair done. I'm not really a big, I don't get my hair colored. I really get it cut like once a year. So that's really, very low maintenance in that regard. But for me, I get my nails done like every 3 weeks, and it's scheduled. And I am a very type A person. I have to plan out, and especially now with, honestly, just the amount of appointments that my children have, and the schedules that I have to manage, multiple people's schedules, and multiple therapies and all of that. But I just plan it out, and it truly, especially in residency, was like, I could look forward to those moments. I knew that, like, I had X thing coming up, and it wasn't, there were other things too that I would schedule, but I truly felt like if I took, and it was like, I needed to be 100% alone. Yeah, it looked a little different when I had a newborn, right? Like, okay, the newborn came with me, but like, or we would go, whatever I was doing, it was going to look a little bit different. But I still made a very strong effort to, like, still go do things and still make friends and still, like, get out and do those things, because at the end of the day, we were in this area for 3 years of residency, and I still wanted a life. I still wanted friends. Yeah, was he working all the time? Sure. But, like, I still went to church. Was it hard? Don't get me wrong. I did not enjoy going to probably 90% of Sundays alone. But at the end of the day, like, then those were the people that I then turned to. Those were the people that, turned into my village. And when you don't live near your family and don't have that, and you just moved from, the village that you created in med school, like, you kind of have to do what you have to do. So I would say just really, truly making time for yourself, which is easier said than done, I get, especially having kids. But even if that's, and I would do this too, even if that looks like, after bedtime, I'd get everybody down, and then, maybe he's working a night at the hospital or he's not coming home for a few hours, and I'd watch a show that I wanted to watch, which sounds really low key, but like, I didn't want to listen to Danny Go or, whatever child show wanted to be on, right? Like, I wanted to do something for me. So like really just making a point to like be, I can't even think of what I'm trying to say.
Just like being able to take that time for yourself is so important.
Intentional. And being intentional about like, no, I want this for myself and I want to do X. I'm not just like sitting here listening to whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure. David and I honestly just recently came to that like conclusion of like, every free moment that I felt like I had, I was then trying to pick up hours at work. And I was lucky enough to work from home and take my job with me when we moved for residency. But Mia is becoming more and more like demanding in the sense of like, I constantly have to look after her. I can't just put her in a little playpen for a few hours kind of thing.
Right.
And going from 2 naps to 1 nap now. And then like during that one nap, I'm needing to do other things around the house because he is working more and I don't have that extra, like I have to pick up more responsibilities around the house, rightfully so.
Right.
So me then trying to work, I was like, I have no time for myself. Like at what point is it enough? And
right.
Honestly, I think it was one of the best decisions that we did make. You know those moments when everyone's asking, what's the dinner plan? Or when are you working again? It can feel like you're constantly trying to keep everyone's schedule straight. That's why I've really been loving the Skylight calendar. It's a simple touchscreen family calendar that lives right in your home and keeps everyone's schedules in one place. It syncs with the calendars you're already using, so appointments, school events, sports, work meetings, everything will automatically show up. It takes so much of the guesswork out of busy family life. One of my favorite parts is that everyone can see what's coming up at a glance. It's helped cut down on the back and forth conversations and made it easier for our whole household to stay organized. If you've been looking for a way to simplify your family schedule, I definitely recommend checking it out. You can learn more and get yours by using the link in my show notes. Now let's get back to the episode. But I guess there's also a lot of guilt that comes with trying to admitting that something is hard because your spouse is out there doing something important. How do you balance appreciating what your spouse does while also acknowledging that like this season is challenging?
Yeah, I think the season is challenging, and I think having it took a little bit of time after, like into first year for my husband to, not that he didn't appreciate me before this, but like to really like recognize, and we came to this understanding, honestly, the middle of first year residency, that he was like, look, and it really came down to, we were making decisions / childcare decisions about, specifically a board that I serve on. So the advocates board that I am on, for the American Osteopathic Association, it does mean committing to that board meant 3 trips a year that I had to take, and they were all paid for, and they were all, relatively quick, like maybe a 1 day, like a 3-day weekend instead of a 2-day weekend. But, that wasn't a lot to ask. And in most seasons that would be totally fine. But being in residency and having 4 kids, like, or 3 and then 4, like that was a hard ask because I had to figure out the childcare piece. And 3 trips a year doesn't sound like a lot, but when they're working that entire time, it was. But he knew, so I say that because he knew that for me, that was something that like I found so much joy in. So even though that, like, yes, at the end of the day, it wasn't that important necessarily in comparison, right? Like at the end of the day, he had to go to residency, he had to go to his job, he had to work, he had to finish his training. Like that's the whole point of us being on this journey. But he recognized that like this was important to me, even if it wasn't necessarily for my career per se, right? But like I really enjoyed it. I really loved, serving on the board, have loved serving on the board and advocating and doing all those things. And it just so happened that it also is in the medical world of things. And so having your partner be just, hand in hand with you, like it's a team. I say all the time, I've said it for years. And when I tell people like, yeah, we went to medical school, and they're like, sometimes they'll be like, oh wait, you're a doctor too? And I'm like, no. And I know we have lots of friends that have done that route too. But I'm like, no, but it is a we thing and he says it too. He says it all the time. Like I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Aimee. Like I would not have gotten through certain parts of medical school or training or residency or whatever, what have it, without the support. Because at the end of the day, like you said, like our roles are different, but they're equally as important, because somebody has to do all the other stuff when they can't or aren't around or can't be around.
Yeah. Just because one person isn't bringing in a financial income doesn't mean that their role isn't valued.
And I think too, recognizing for me, a big thing for me, it took me a while to realize it, but just like and I don't know why. I think it was just a mental thing. And honestly, it's something that my therapist had said to me at one point, which caveats on the point of do something for yourself. In the middle of residency, I started, doing some virtual counseling after kid number 3, just because I needed it. I needed it for myself. And it was only twice a month, and it was fine. And it wasn't a huge, it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever that looks like for you. And it was so good for me in residency. And I have continued. I didn't think, I was like, I could probably stop. And then I was like, no, counseling's good for everyone. We're going to continue this.
Yeah.
And so, but something that she had said to me early on in our clinical relationship there, she was just like, your spouse isn't absent by choice, right? Like his career requires it. And so because of that, like, you have to figure out how to make it work, right? You have to communicate and make it happen. It doesn't mean that the mental load doesn't then come of like, it's hard. The mental load is heavier. Like, and my husband admits this all the time. He's like, especially when he was off with his last kid he took 8 of the 12 weeks of paternity leave already. And when he took those 8 weeks, he was home for a total of 10 with the 2 weeks before I had the baby. And he was like, being home is like so much harder than being at work. Like you do so much, and he's like, I work. Yeah, don't get me wrong. And like, I see patients and like, whatever, but he's like, but this work is so much harder. So being validated in that response as well definitely helps too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think even sometimes David says that too. He was like, you have the hardest job, and that's just being a mom, because there are some days where, I'm not going to lie, he'll come through the door and the house will be absolutely trashed, and it will stay like that for 48, 72 hours. But there are days like today where I didn't nap with Mia and I cleaned and blew through the entire house. And he comes home, and like also being able to see the relief on his face after like we hosted all weekend and things, to then walk in the door to a clean house. It almost makes us all feel like a fresh restart for the week and be like, let's go. Like,
right.
I do want to shift into something that's very important to both of us, specifically experiencing raising a neurodivergent child. So for parents who may be listening and are just beginning this journey, can you share your story? When did you first start to like notice differences, and what were like some of those early signs for you?
Yeah, so my oldest was born, like I said, during towards the end February of our first year of medical school. And so that put us at 2019. So she would have, and I say that because it's important to note the timeline. So 2020, she would have hit February of 2020. So right before COVID, she hit her, 1 year mark. And that was right when she, at that, up until that point, I was just kind of like, again, she was my first. I was kind of like, oh, she's not doing this yet. I had never been through it before. I didn't really know. I had friends that had kids, but you don't know when you're going through it for the first time. I've said it so many times since then, and I'll say it again, but you don't know what you don't know. And now I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and I, at one point, posted about it. I was like, I wish I could go back and tell 7 year ago me that it's going to be okay, because I remember feeling so even prior to a diagnosis, even prior to our journey with all of the things with her, it's going to be okay, and she's going to be okay, and she's super smart, and she's going to thrive, and I am going to, you're going to do all the things that she needs, and you're going to be there for her, and it's going to be okay. But in the moment at that 1 year, 1 year check, and even leading up to that 1 year check, honestly, 6, 9, 12 months, those visits with her physician, we were kind of already on the oh, she's not doing this, she's not doing this, she was not rolling over, she's not whatever. So fast forward to, I was then also at the time I was pregnant. So I had our second October of 2020. And right around then, so it was shortly thereafter, I think about 6 weeks after he was born, is when we officially got a diagnosis, a global developmental delay diagnosis, as well as an autism diagnosis, where we went to school. In the city that we went to school in. And so, from there, I truly, going into that appointment, had no idea. I knew she was delayed, but I didn't know that meant that we were going to come home with an autism. I had no idea what the ramification, I had no clue. And now I say, it's so funny, because now, I've learned, the cycle, the progress, all of the different things that come along with that. And it's a lot, and it is very overwhelming. And it was at first. We got involved. So we got the diagnosis in 2020. But prior to that diagnosis had started right when COVID happened, which is why it just made things a little bit complicated, because it was when everybody was figuring out how to do medicine virtually.
Yeah.
And so we started in May of 2020 with virtual PT with a 18-month-old, not even 18-month-old, but going to be 18-month-old, who wasn't even rolling over or crawling. And that was so incredibly difficult. And I was like, what am I even doing? What are we even doing here? So fast forward through some of that, and, she has come very far. She's been in physical. She finally just recently graduated from physical therapy. That's 7 years later. But she, she can walk and she can talk, and she's in, starting second grade and all the things. But she's still, has her things. She's still got her deficits. She has an IEP at school. She needs the extra advocacy from me. She needs that extra encouragement and help, and all the extra fun appointments that come along with that.
Yeah, totally. Just comes to mind every time when we talk about this, but I will never forget, and I don't think I've ever officially thanked you for it, but I remember sitting in the hospital alone with Mia, and Mia had been admitted for seizure-like activity, and I remember getting a text from you and telling you, but you were the first person I felt like I was actually honest with, and I was like, I am exhausted, I am mentally, physically exhausted, and you just replied back, just validating it. And you're like, it is so exhausting. And I remember just almost crying, sitting on the parent bed thinking
Yep.
Oh my word. Someone else gets this. Aimee lived it, continues to live it. And she's made it through to the other side. So I'm we will make it out. But thank you.
Yes. It doesn't. Yeah, no, I actually, it's funny, we've had some side conversations before this, but yeah, like I, I've had multiple people in my journey that, medical school residency, and like after the fact they'd be like, yeah, well, I saw your post, or you texted me one day and said X, and I just can't believe, like, how do you do it? And, because fast forward, so my daughter, she had her whole journey and has been a journey. And then since, we've gone through multiple different things with multiple different kiddos, and even up until more recently, our youngest, has had, went for what I thought was just a typical outpatient, screening scan for, head circumference size, getting too large too fast. And I was like, oh, my daughter had this. It'll be no big deal. Your kid number 5, and it's just fine. They're just checking on this just to be sure. Yeah. Well, not so much, So just when I think I know it all, like, and I'm like, oh, I got this. I can do this. It's exhausting, and it's okay to, like, I had somebody at one point tell me, like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to grieve what you thought was going to be normal, or, it's okay to not be okay. Because
no, yeah.
there are lots of moments that I may act like everything is fine, but there are also moments where I'm like, I am not okay.
Yeah. No, I think so many people mean good in what they're saying when they say, like, oh, be strong for her, or you're such a strong mom and things. And it's like, yes, like, I am that and I want to be that. But, like, there are moments behind the doors where, like, I am going to break down. I am going to be frustrated or sad, or, like you said, grieve what should have been, what could have, all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess getting into a little bit of, like, that advocating aspect, was there, like, a specific moment where you started realizing that you needed to advocate for your kids? I know for myself, I went to the appointment by myself. Again, my husband was working, and it was actually one of Mia's allergist appointments because she had a lot of food allergies and things. And I'll never forget, the allergist literally looked at me and told me that I should cover my 1-year-old in Vaseline all over her body, face, arms, hands, everything, to make sure that it wasn't like a touch allergy to the food items. And I literally wanted to look at her and I was like, do you have children? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, my kid is going to ingest more Vaseline than anything, / you think my 11, 12-month-old is going to sit there while I lather her up in this? Like,
right.
And that's when I was like, you know what? Sometimes I'm like, I think I do need a second opinion on this, because sometimes you almost feel crazy. This just logically does not make sense.
Right.
And, like, I don't know. It just, like, blew my mind. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to start advocating for more. Or even when Mia was having her seizure events, and I was like, this isn't right. And instead it was going to be like, okay, we'll see you in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. But then you kind of have to get to that level where you're like, okay, if I walk through the ER right now, we'll get admitted and get answers. Like, that's what needs to happen, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, I think, it definitely takes, I don't want to say like a serious thing, but it's like one of those things where you're like, well, how do I get not what I want out of this encounter, but, like, I think too, sometimes being that we know so much in medicine, and I know so much of the backside of, like, for example, when we went for that scan for his head recently, and the radiologist, so, like, the ultrasound tech does it, whatever, she walks out, she's like, okay, I'll be right back, I'm going to make sure they have all the images they want, and then we'll let you go. And I was like, cool, great, fantastic. So I'm thinking I'm going to get to go back home. All my 4 other kids are at home with someone who's watching them because my husband was deployed. And then she comes back a second later and she's like, okay, she said something kind of weird and I don't exactly remember her wording, but like it kind of in the back of my head, like pinged, because she was like, yeah, so the radiologist will be right in. And I was like, why is the radiologist coming in here? They don't come in here to talk to me. Like, why are they coming in here? And so then of course, not a couple minutes later, the radiologist and a resident walk in, and I literally looked at his badge. I see that it says radiologist. The other guy says resident, take a quick glance across the room, and I look at him and I'm like, you're not in here to tell me it's normal. So what's wrong?
Yeah.
And in that moment, it's like, and then to me, their response is like, you've been around the block, what's, the process, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm very aware of what's going on here. And so I think that, it's hard because in those moments and in that specific situation, like I was like, basically that day I needed to advocate and continue. We had to get transferred to a children's hospital. And then it was kind of like, oh, well, we need to cover our bases, but we don't think it's this, but it might be this. And, again, just like you said, talking about advocating for them, like it's hard though. Like there's that piece of like, of course you at the end of the day want to do what's best for your kid, and you want to get the answers and you want to know what's wrong, especially when like, I don't know the answer, especially when they're younger and they can't talk and they can't tell you what's wrong. But it's so mentally exhausting sometimes when you're just like, okay, we just went through this whole thing. And so fast forward, I spent 14 hours in 3 different hospitals, which started out as just what was supposed to be an outpatient visit. And so, like that, at the end of that day, I was just like, oh my gosh. And then I woke up the next day and my husband was still gone. And we had 4 other appointments that day for 3 other kids. And those are the moments where it's like, okay, I want to advocate and I want to continue to find the answers for X, but I don't know if I have it in me.
Yeah.
I think, and to go back to answering your first question, like on that note of like, when did I think it took me a little while, honestly, even through having our second, because he really didn't have anything major until we moved to residency, till he was about 2. And even then he's my very high functioning. He's got some ADHD, he's got some stuff, but in the realm of things, he's been my pretty healthy kid. And so it really took having number 3, who's pretty severely autistic, and also just has some, at that point is when we started to see some of my daughter's like just other medical conditions that were coming, that came along with some of the things. And then when I got asked of like, hey, do you want to do some genetic testing? And then we got some answers from that truly became the point where I was like, okay, now I know why X is the way it is. And so I need to advocate for it. And that, and as she started, even just in preschool, like as she started preschool and she was in the public school system, and I started to learn that like, okay, this is what I can ask for. And she qualifies for X under this because she has a developmental delay and, all of those things. But that took time. Like that wasn't just I learned that in, a year or 2. That definitely took 3 or 4 years of being a parent and going through it and her getting older and, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I think you would make one of those great, like parent advocates that goes into the IEP meetings one day.
Yes.
You would be a rock star at that. But no, totally. Is when talking about being an advocate and things, like even the different rules and laws by state lines is absolutely incredible.
Yes.
Mia graduated from physical therapy prior to moving to South Carolina, but my poor kid, she's going to be 2 at the end of October, and she probably says maybe 4 or 5 words, and it's slowly coming, but she was in full speech therapy once a week in Virginia. And now that we came to South Carolina, they said that the early intervention, because it always like changes names through every state.
Yes.
But whatever it is in South Carolina, they came out to reevaluate her. And now they're saying that she's delayed, but not delayed enough to receive services.
Yep.
And I'm like, are you serious? Like, that just blows my mind. But I'm
because
like,
every state is, and I didn't know about all that either until, like, I didn't know how different each state's early intervention program was until we moved from medical school to residency. And then in residency, we lived on the border of two states. And I only learned that just even those two states, like, now granted, we lived in Illinois. It's not like we could get, so we lived right outside of St. Louis, so Illinois and Missouri. But I learned that truly how different it can be, and drastically different. And it's crazy, because then you're like, okay, well, these are my options, but like, I want my kid to get services, or I don't want them to be hurting, for help or need more help. But like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Is there any resources, like how were you becoming educated on what the state laws were, or what services were available to your daughter? Like just Googling, or?
Googling some, and then really just like asking questions. Like when I would initially, call for the consult, get the state, the coordinator, and all, it also is about, you're going to get some good people, in your circle, and in terms of like, like I had a good coordinator, a really good state coordinator, but then sometimes you might not get, it's like, it's all about who you get. Right. And some of that is just luck of the draw. But I also always, in residency especially, and then here, like, whether it's just like a local, I search Facebook, and not that that's like the standard gold rule, right? But like, I go search different pages. Like when I was in Illinois, there was like a special needs Facebook group, and I would and then there was a mom group, and yes, there can be, but I specifically use it as like research purposes, right? Like, let me see if anybody's gone to this specialist before, and I like search the name in the search function. Right. And I typically a lot of times wouldn't even necessarily post a new post. I just would use it specifically for like an archive purpose, go back and be like, okay, well, somebody posted 3 years ago that X, whatever. And so I learned, I would say definitely in residency, I learned to do a lot more of that. And then as and it's hard, especially when you move to a new place and you don't know anybody, but as I was there longer and I met more people, and then I would just ask around. And once I got connected in one area. So like, for example, in the state of Illinois, they also do like a birth to 3 program. And again, it's very different in every state, what they do or what they offer, but they did a birth to 3 program, and it's free if you lived in this city. And we did, our address was, and so we qualified, and basically it was like, they just did activities, whatever. And so they give you, it's like free resources basically for any, kid birth to 3, whatever. So then our family had continued to be a part of the program, because we continued to have children under the age of 3. So we would continue to be involved in that, and they would give you different resources. They would share different things. There was always like holiday, they do a Halloween event. So like, just truly, then once you get in I feel like once I got my foot in one place and you could connect, like you could feel well connected, like I just asked the questions. Like if I also early on felt like it was never a stupid question, even though, whether it's on the education side of things or the medical side of things, like, and I've said it before to physicians, I said it recently, I'm like, look, this might be dumb, but I'm going to ask it because I don't know the answer. If my husband was here, he probably wouldn't ask it, but whatever. And sometimes I'll say that to my husband too. I'll be like, this is probably stupid. And he'll be like, actually, no, it's a really good question, So like, I think truly, like I said earlier, like, no, nothing, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't ask, you're definitely not going to know. But on that same note too, sometimes you don't know what to ask. So I do feel like a huge starting point, and advice I've given to many parents, like especially in the medical, so like when with this journey of like, we've had friends who've like, they've either moved twice in med school, like, and then they move again for residency, and then they moved again. And like, it's hard when you have neurodivergent or even just kids in any, with like different like special medical conditions or whatever, and you're trying to find answers, or even you have diagnoses, but you're trying to find, a certain type of doctor or whatever. Just truly, I'm like, start doing your research, like ahead of time when, March feels like, okay, you don't have a lot of time, whatever. But like when we knew that we were moving we knew a little longer because we were military, but we knew in December that we were moving, that next summer. I started researching then. I actually got our daughter and son, well, I guess at the time just our daughter, on an ABA wait list, because those can be historically very long. And I got her on a wait list, and crazy enough, mind you, we didn't even have a house yet. We didn't know any of those details. We didn't know where we were going to live. Well, fast forward to, we get a house, we buy a house, we move, we do all the things. I get a phone call about 3 weeks after we moved in. I was still kind of just waiting on like different like insurance stuff to go through and all that. And fast forward, we got a spot off the wait list on the clinic that was literally a half a mile down the road from our house.
Oh my.
Well, I had no idea when I put her name on that wait list what that was going to look like, that we were going to be living a half mile. Like, I had no clue. But I just literally started throwing my name on all the lists and, threw a shot in the dark because you kind of have to.
Yeah. I know Mia's still on the speech waiting list here, and I beat myself up that I didn't do it sooner. But at the same time, they're like, oh, we need the referral from the pediatrician from this. And I'm like, oh.
Sometimes it doesn't help. Like sometimes you do what you got to do and you can't. So don't beat yourself up, because it's hard, but there's only so much you can do. And you have a lot that you're doing, like all while I say that, but also it's like, okay, you're moving to this place and you have to do 5,000 things. Like, it's not just like, oh, I need to get on a speech waiting list. Like, I need to figure out where we're going to live and how we're getting there. And, 5 other kids or 4 kids. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it. But Aimee and I actually do go back a little bit. Although I don't think we've ever met in person, which is wild, but we've talked.
Yeah, I actually was saying that to my husband this morning. I was like, I don't think we've ever actually met in person, but we lived in the same place.
Exactly. Both of our husbands graduated from LUCOM. Both of us were actually president of the LUCOM SAA, and now you are also president of the AAOA, which is such an incredible role. For people listening who may not know, can you explain what the AAOA is and the mission behind it and anything else about the organization?
Yeah, so it stands for the AAOA, stands for the American Advocates Association. So it's the advocates to the American Osteopathic Association. And so, like you said, both of our husbands went to LUCOM, which is a DO school. And so their like governing body, whatever that deals with like policy and advocacy on the doctor side, is the AOA, so the American Osteopathic Association, and their headquarters or their board is in Chicago, and then they have a advocacy group that is the American Osteopathic Association with the advocates. And so this year, we're going on my 8th year on that board. I got involved like you during medical school, being a part of SAA. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, basically advocating there, at a very smaller role, right? Just our little bitty one med school, but helping the students that were there, and kind of, just doing what I could do, to kind of hang out, but also like make med school doable there. And then I continued to stay involved and got involved at the national level, which is the advocates. And essentially one of our big missions is, just to support the osteopathic profession, and like promote it in lots of different ways. We have lots of different things that we participate in and attend, whether that be OMED. We also do special projects that different like SAAs or different schools or different physicians can apply for. Just all kinds of different like advocacy type things, sometimes podcasts that they'll apply for, like a medical school or medical students or even residency programs have tried to, put on different events or different podcasts or what have you, about just different DO type related things. And then they apply for those things. We have a lot of different avenues, but I've stayed involved. And I think, for me in med school, it was a big part of like what I poured into. I enjoyed seeing the people like that I helped and like continuing on while we were in med school. And so I wanted to see that on a larger scale. I really, just the people that I met in that first year that I had attended the osteopathic conference, so the medical education conference that takes place where we have one of the 3 times we meet in person a year. When I first attended that, it was very, it was just eye-opening to like be around people like that have walked that same journey as you and have done the same thing on the other side, right? They are the spouses, the family members, the coworkers of these people who have gone through med school, and they get it. It's more people just like you and me, right? Like being in a room with these people and being on a board with these people is like the most fulfilling thing. One of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. Like, it's just so validating to like be in a room and then just like, yeah, you're going to vent, you're going to talk about the things you've gone through, but then also like, okay, now how could we make this better? Or what could we, what grant could we start? And that's exactly what's happened since I've been on the board. Like we've started like a new grant that came out a couple of years ago, but basically it's this Holiday Hug Award. It's in conjunction with the AOF, so the American Osteopathic Foundation. And essentially anybody in residency or medical school can apply. And it's just for extra funds around the holidays. And, obviously there's different, like you can say why, you feel like your family needs it, or even you as a single student needs it. And it's just like, it's great because I'm like, I've watched other families go through things. I've watched our own family go through things as you've been through medical school and residency. And it's great that I've been able to continue like helping and advocating and, being like, yeah, you should be a part of the board, or you should come on the board, because it's truly been such a great part of my journey as well.
Yeah. So for someone listening who wants to get involved with the AAOA or support them in any way, how can they find that?
Well, you can go to our website, and you can like fill out, there's like a contact form there. So that's an easy way. You can also contact us any way you find, or if you find me on social media or whatever, what have you. But essentially really just at a very minimal level at the beginning. You can just, even if you're not going to go to a physical, like if you're going to be at OMED and you're going to go with your spouse to a meeting like that, then you can find us there. But outside of that, if you wanted to be involved, you can even just do like committee work for a little bit. And it's all just once you reach out, we can kind of get you in contact with the right people, and do some minimal committee work at the beginning. And then from there, like if you wanted to continue, and that's how we've been able to kind of bring people up through, is they kind of start out at that SAA level. And then if they graduate and they finish and they want to stay involved, or they want to do minimal work, and then as their husbands have finished residency, or their spouses have finished residency, and then they want to stay involved, they can every July. So we just finished application season. The application for the board comes out, and you can apply to be on the national board, and it's great.
Wow. So I think that this is just such a unique piece of your story. You're advocating, parenting, managing life, and doing all this while your spouse has a demanding career. So I think the main question that I have for you, that I think a lot of other people will have for you, is how do you do it all? What's your secret? 5 kids, solo parenting, and president of the board. I saw you also posted PTO mom and all these other things.
Yeah.
I was seeing today. I was
can't say no. That's my first issue. No, it's not an issue. I mean, I definitely would say I am an extroverted person. So I definitely like being involved and, doing those social pieces are big for me. And that's what ultimately pours back into my cup. So even though sometimes, yes, it does mean I'm busy, or it means life can be even crazier, because yes, I do have 5 kids in my life. People look at my calendar and they're like, I feel overwhelmed just looking at that. Yeah, well, I mean, it is a lot. I'm not going to lie. There is not a day on my calendar where there's not something happening, right? Like we have things every day, and at least something. So my biggest advice, even just to people in this journey, is just even if it's just the smallest thing, find something that you enjoy, because they have found what they enjoy in medicine, or maybe what they don't enjoy in medicine, and then they do something else in medicine. But you get what I mean? They have found a piece that, and that is a long journey to get to the piece that they enjoy. Because I truly believe as well that my husband, especially now, we're finally to a place where he enjoys it, right? There's not that piece in residency where he's like, oh my gosh, I hate this rotation. We're not in that anymore. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it does get better. But there are still some pretty crappy pieces of, he may not have crappy hours sometimes, some specialties would have, right? Or crappy shifts. But I mean, the piece for us is he still could get deployed, and he still very much has that, fear. Well, he was like, oh, well, this might not go very well. I'm going to deal with said disease, and I don't know that there's a lot of scary pieces of that. And so at the end of the day, I recognize that he is doing what he went to school for, and that's, and to provide for our family and all the things. And he's doing a great job. But I also, in order to be the best me that I can be, and the best mom, and the best wife, and the best friend to all of the people that are in my life, I need to do things for myself. And doing those things for myself looks like X, Y, and Z, right? Whatever that is for whoever whoever's listening and whoever's out there, you have to internally look at what that looks like for you, because it's not something I came up with overnight either. Some of that I got, and I really kind of did some self-looking into myself, and just really paying attention, but also through counseling in residency. When I started that, I truly was okay, what is going to help me get through this season, because this really sucks, and I really don't like this year, or I don't like this rotation, or I don't but I also don't want to live the next 3 years. And that's one of the first things I told my counselor was I don't want to live the next 3 years looking for the next thing, right? Oh my gosh, we just got to get through the next 4 weeks. And she's like, no, but you need to look at it more in a way of okay, how can I make this really crappy rotation better, right? Or this really, crappy moment in time, or this blip in time, because at the end of the day, it truly is just a blip in time. And that's really what helped me to focus on, so when we had a rotation that was 2 weeks and, 2 weeks of nights and 2 weeks of days, I was like, okay, we're going to go out of town for these 2 weeks of nights, because none of you were in real school, and I don't really want to do this. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And so we did. So just doing those things, and doing the not typical thing, especially outside of medicine. You look at, I think sometimes too, it's really hard. I say this all the time. I was told so many times with my daughter, right? Especially as I saw some of her delays, don't compare. It is so much easier said than done. And I say that in the kid world of like, don't compare your kids to other kids. But I also say that in the world of medicine too, because everybody's situation can be so different and is so different depending on how many kids, what state you live in, do you have family nearby, do you not have family nearby, what specialty are they, like everything can look so different. But truly, like whatever's gonna work for you, like you gotta do it, and you gotta be the best you can be, because your kids need you, your spouse also needs you. And at the end of the day, like somebody's got to hold the glue together. You got to be the glue to hold you together.
No, I think that's all such great advice. I think that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you so much, Aimee, for being here and being vulnerable with us today. I think conversations like this matter because so often people only see the accomplishments, the careers, the titles, the milestones, but behind all of that are families navigating real life, hard seasons, and doing their best every single day. If this episode resonated with you, it would mean so much if you shared it with someone who might need to hear this. And as always, I'd love to hear from you, your experiences, your stories, or even things you wish you knew. So feel free to reach out or message me if you'd like to be on the podcast. You can find me on social media at Life of a DR Wife. And to those of you listening, thank you so much for being here and for spending this time with us. I don't take that lightly. Until next time, take a breath, pour yourself a nice coffee, and be kind to yourself. I'll see you in the next one.